This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Kubernetes training. So as I mentioned in the last demo session, as part of this Kubernetes course, we are also going to cover the Docker. So today let us start with the Docker. So in this session, I'm going to cover Docker architecture, Docker lifecycle, Docker installation on the EC2 instance, and some of the basic commands we will execute and how Docker will work and help us to create the containers. We will see that. Okay. So to explain the Docker architecture first, I'm in the whiteboard. So Docker architecture consists of three important components, that is Docker client and then Docker host and then Docker registry. So why we need Docker client? So Docker client is basically provides the Docker CLI commands for the user to communicate with the Docker host. What actually Docker host contains? It is having the Docker daemon. So Docker daemon is a process which helps us to create the images and also it will create the containers from the image. So when the user requests for creating the containers or image, so user will use the Docker CLI command. So those command will execute, and so when you execute that particular command to create the image or container, it will communicate with the Docker daemon process, and Docker daemon will actually create the images and the containers. So now once you create the images, you have to maintain in a central repository so that anyone can able to access that. So in the Docker registry, we have two types again. One is public registry and another one is private registry. So public registry is help where you are going to store all the images which can be accessible to anyone in the world. But private registry, it is in the organization level, where within the organization or within the team you want to access particular image for your application, then you will create the private registry. For the public registry, the famous registry which is available, that is Docker Hub. I will explain and how you can use the images which is already available or developed by someone in the Docker Hub or on the any particular machine you are working with, how you can create the containers from that particular images. So Docker CLI commands are basically consist of to build the image. So that is, if you execute this Docker build, it will communicate with the Docker daemon, and then Docker daemon will build the images. And then for running the containers, you have one more CLI command, that is Docker run. So when you execute the Docker run command, then this will go or this request is goes to the Docker daemon process, and then Docker daemon will create the containers for you. So again, we have various CLI commands for different process, and the Docker daemon is the main process which is going to take care of that. So this is the complete architecture of the Docker. So now let us understand the Docker lifecycle. So let us assume you have the application source code which is written in any languages, that is maybe Java or Python or Golang, any programming language you consider. So this you have the application source code. In the source code itself or in the directory itself or where you are maintaining the source code, there actually you are going to create the Docker file. So I will explain what is Docker file in the later session, because we have separate session for the Docker file, how you can write the instruction or some logic inside this Docker file so that it will help us to build the image. So once you have the source code, you will be creating the text file, that is Docker file. So this is just a text file where you are providing the instructions. And using this Docker file, you will be executing one command, that is docker build. It will help us to build the image. So that is docker build. And then it will create the image for you. And then using this particular image, you can create the containers using the docker run command. And let us understand what is Docker image now. So Docker image is a read-only template where it has the different layers. So what is this layers again? So each instruction you have provided in the Docker file, it will be treated as a layer in the image when you create that particular image from the Docker file. And each instruction in the Docker file will be treated as a layer or create as a layer in the image itself. And what is container? It is a running instance of your application. So image is not actually the running instance, but when you create the container from the image, then container is become the running instance for your application. So this is the simple Docker lifecycle we have. Now let us go to the terminal and we'll install the Docker on our EC2 machine, and we will see how we can execute the various command which is available from the Docker. So I have already created the EC2 instance on my AWS free trial account. So I'm using the same instance here. I have done the SSH here, and I have logged into this particular EC2 instance which I have created. So now let me restart this terminal. So let me zoom this particular terminal for the better visibility. Currently on this particular machine, when you logged in or in any EC2 instance, you are firstly logged in, you have to update all the dependency which is related to this Ubuntu machine. So now how you can do that? Using the sudo apt update. So let's wait for 1 or 2 minutes. Once you update the package or dependencies, now let us check whether Docker is installed or not. So currently I don't have Docker. Even I did not install for this particular session for the Docker demo, because I want to show the Docker installation on the EC2 instance as well. So let me execute this command. So when you execute this Docker, it will show some of the output, but currently it is not installed on this machine. That's why you are getting this message. So now I will be going to use one of this command to install the Docker on my EC2 instance with the Ubuntu user. So as you are already aware of, if you are already familiar with the Linux concept, right? You have the root and the other user. So root has all the privileges to install the Docker. Similar way, with the Ubuntu user also you can install the Docker, but you have to do some extra configuration, because Ubuntu user does not have the full privileges to access the Docker. So I will show step by step how you can install the Docker, but let me execute this command. that is using the app package, I am installing the Docker tool. So I will provide this -y option because when I execute this command, it will give me some yes or no question. Every time I need to answer yes or no for proceeding further. So to avoid those situations, so I will type it as a yes so that it will not ask any yes or no question to me. So every time I don't need to type further to proceed. So now let me run this. So now Docker is installed. Let me check it out by running the Docker. So when you run this command, you are seeing this output. Previously, when I don't install the Docker itself, then we are not able to see this kind of output, that is various command which is provided from the Docker. So now we have successfully installed the Docker, but still we will get some error while accessing the Docker host. That is by executing various CLI command. If you execute that after installing this Docker on your machine, you still able to see some errors, that is permission denied. So let me execute one of the command, that is docker ps. So docker ps, which help us to list out all the running current containers. So currently I don't have any containers. So let me execute this command. So I'm getting this permission denied error. So as I mentioned, we are using the Ubuntu user to install the Docker. So by default, Ubuntu user has don't have the much privileges to access this Docker daemon. So that's why we are getting this permission denied. So how you can solve this error? We have to execute another command, that is sudo usermod and -ag docker Ubuntu. I will tell what is this particular command is going to do. So basically, when you install the Docker, it will come up with this Docker group. So now what you are telling, there is a Ubuntu user, it wants to access the Docker daemon, or it wants to execute some of the Docker CLI command. So give the permission, because I'm adding the Ubuntu user to the Docker group. Now you have the enough privileges to access the Docker daemon. So once I execute this, so Docker daemon will be accessible and we can able to communicate with through the CLI commands. So now let me run this. Once I execute this, you have to restart this particular terminal because the changes are not reflected directly. So that's why even if you execute the docker ps command, still you are able to see this error. So you have to restart the terminal again. So let me close this terminal and okay, so let me clear this terminal. So now once you execute the docker ps command, you can at least see the some output which is related to the container. That is, currently I don't have any container, that's why you are not able to see any output here, but it is giving some fields which is related to the containers. So now let us see how we can create the containers from the image which is already available in the Docker Hub. So now let me go to the Docker Hub first. So this is the Docker Hub registry you have. So this is similar to GitHub, where you have in the GitHub you will be storing the source code for your application. Similar way, in the Docker Hub you are going to store the images for your application. So if you can see, there is a explore tab here. If you go there, you will see lot of images which is developed by someone, and they already pushed into the particular images in this Docker Hub. So everything is available here. So now I'm interested to pull this image, or that is Nginx image, and I want to create this Nginx container from this particular image. So now let us see how we can do that using the docker CLI command. So there is a two possible way you can use the or you can create the containers. Now we will see one of the method, and then we will go with another method. So there is a docker run command. When you want to pull the image and want to create the container, then you will be using the docker run. That is a single command. What actually it is doing, it is pulling the image from the docker hub, that is nginx image, and from the nginx image it is creating the nginx container. So now let me run this. So don't worry about this -d option. I will explain what is this -d option, but let me provide the image name here. So currently I'm interested in the latest of the nginx image. So this is the tag. So I will explain what is this tags, why we need to provide, but currently focus on how this docker run command will be execute and create the containers for you. So currently it is pulling this nginx image from the docker hub. And now the container is created with this ID. So now let us see by executing docker ps command. So docker ps, which help us to list all the running container. Currently I have one, that is nginx latest with the container ID. So this is the one way you can use to create the containers, and you can also pull the image directly. There is another way, that is using the docker pull command and provide the nginx latest. So before that, because we already pulled this nginx latest image, so let me remove the container as well as image from the docker itself. So for that, first we have to stop the container by using the docker stop, because the nginx container is running currently. Before even removing the container, we have to stop the container, and then we can remove this container. So now there are no containers running currently. And how you can list the images in the docker using the docker images command. Currently we have the nginx image. Let me remove that. How you can remove the images using the rmi command. So that is using nginx latest. So now we don't have any images, we don't have any containers. So now let me run the docker pull command by providing the name, image name. So once I execute this docker pull, it will pull the image from the docker hub. So now if I use the docker images, you will see there is a nginx latest image. So now we don't have containers currently, because docker pull is only did the pulling of image from the docker hub. It is not created any containers. So now it's my responsibility to create the containers or to start the containers. For this, I need to provide the image ID along with the docker create command. So now currently the container is not running because I have just created the container, but I need to explicitly tell to the container you need to start. So currently there are no running containers, but if you provide docker ps -a option, it will provide the list of container which is stopped or created or running containers. So it will list out all the containers which are available and also running. It may be stopped or it is created. Currently there is a one container gets created. Now let me start this. So to start this container, I have to use the docker start command by providing this container ID. Once I execute the start command, now if you list out the docker ps or if you execute the docker ps command, now currently we have this nginx container running. So this is the another way you can use it. So to pull the image and to create the container from that image. But this is a three-step process. But if you use the docker run command directly, then docker run will do the pulling of image from the docker hub, and also it will run the containers for you. So now there is a one running container. So if you want to directly remove this container, it is not possible because running containers, if you try to remove that, let me use the remove command here, and I'm going to provide the container ID. If you try to remove the running container, Docker daemon will throw the response saying that you cannot remove a running container. Stop the container before attempting to removal. So how you can do that? Using the docker stop command by providing the container ID. Once you stop it, you can run the docker remove command. Now the container is successfully removed. So docker ps, there is no running container. Docker ps -a, there are also no container because we already removed that particular container, even that is stopped. And also we understood with the help of docker rmi command, we can remove the images. And then we have another command, that is docker inspect. So let me run. So before even going to the docker inspect command, so let us understand what is -d. So when I don't provide this -d option, if I just run this docker run nginx latest, so my terminal gets busy because this is a web server which is continuously listening on some port. You can, if you want to stop it, you have to press the Control C. Then the container itself gets stopped. That means if you just list out docker ps or execute the docker ps, there is no containers running. How you can like make the term, how you can access the particular container when it is running, you can just duplicate this tab and you can run the docker ps command. Then you can able to see there is a nginx latest command is running. But if you want to work with the same terminal, but currently when you execute this docker run nginx latest, so the terminal got busy, you can't able to execute any other command. You have to come out from that process and then you can execute the commands. So in order to avoid this process, so what we can do is, so we can use the -d option. What we are telling is run it in a detached mode, or it as a run it as a background process. Don't run it or make the terminal got busy when the web server is running. So now if I run this, you will get the container ID directly. Okay, I think I did mistake. Okay. So now you got this container ID. So now if I list out docker ps, there is a container running with this particular ID. So that means your terminal like did not get busy, but still it is running as a background process and you will get the ID directly. This is the -d option. And when you execute the docker ps command, you are seeing this name section. That is, by default docker is providing the name to the particular container which gets created. So now if you want to give your custom names or whatever the name you want to give for the containers, then you can also give using the name option. So that is, let me create another container. It is using this name option, you can provide nginx sample, and I will run it as a background process and I will provide the image name. Once I run this, okay, so I did mistake here. First you have to provide this as a background process and then you can provide the name option. So now if I run this, okay, sorry, I did mistake in the naming of that particular image. So you can't provide the colon here because when we are providing the nginx latest image, we are also using the colon. It got confused here. So let me provide this. So now you got this ID. So now if you list out docker ps or execute this docker ps command, there is a container gets created with the nginx latest image and provided the name that is nginx sample. This is how you can customize the name for your containers. And also you can use the docker inspect command to inspect about the container or to get the details, complete details of these containers. So here, if you can also see the network details, volume details. So I will explain what is networking in the Docker or volume or any other details. If you want to find out with respect to the containers, then we can able to use this docker inspect command. By providing the container ID, you can able to see all the detail with respect to this particular container. So now we have one more command, that is docker exec. So we have another command, that is docker exec. So let me execute this docker ps. Currently I have two containers running. So now I want to get inside of this container. How can I do that? Using the exec command, using the interactive terminal, and I'm providing the container ID, and I'm using the bin bash shell. That means it is similar to how you are working with the Linux. Even when you are executing the shell command, you are using the shell script, right? So here I am currently interested in a bash script. So to get inside of this particular container, because container is also kind of Linux machine only. It will support all the commands and whatever you see in the Linux machine, right? It may be file and folders. So those things you can also see inside the particular container. So now if I run this, now you can able to see I'm inside this particular container, that is using this particular ID. So now I can execute the ls command here. So if I execute this, you can also see there is some folders and files are present. It is similar to the Linux. So this is all about how you can work with some of the basic commands in the Docker.